Today's message is an ambassador for Christ, and this is based on 19 and 20 at the end of the section dealing with the warfare. Paul says, and also for me, having just said, pray for all the saints. He includes himself now in verse 19. And interesting what he asks the Christians to pray for. That words may be given to me in opening my mouth boldly to proclaim the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in chains, that I may declare it boldly as I ought to speak. That was Paul's prayer request. It wasn't a prayer that I get out of prison. It wasn't pray that my pain would ease. And of course, Paul wouldn't turn down any prayers for that, but his primary concern was the spiritual need of him proclaiming the mystery of the gospel, which of course is the Jews and Gentiles into one body, and of course to be an ambassador and declare it boldly as I ought to speak. And that brings up the overall point of this message, which is, are we ambassadors for Jesus Christ? And when we think of an ambassador, in the ancient world and still today, an ambassador is a representative who speaks and acts on behalf of a sovereign or a government in a foreign land. The core duties include representing their country or the king, conveying messages and policies, acting with delegated authority, living in a foreign land, and promoting peace, negotiation, and reconciliation. An ambassador must be loyal, articulate, and trustworthy because their words and actions reflect directly on the one who sent them. And in this verse, Ephesians 6, verse 20, Paul calls himself an ambassador in chains, which is striking because ambassadors are normally dignitaries, not prisoners. Yet Paul highlights that even in chains, he represents Jesus Christ boldly. His loyalty and message aren't diminished by his circumstances. We see this in verse 19 because he asks for boldness to proclaim the mystery of the gospel. He is aware of his divine commission. Acts chapter 9, he's a chosen instrument of mine. And he is a faithful representative of Jesus Christ, even in adversity. In fact, if you read the prison epistles, that's one of the things that strikes you is, even in the prison cell, cold, smelly, dark, chained to a soldier, Paul is still representing Jesus Christ faithfully. And of course, then when we bring it to us, 2 Corinthians chapter 5 says, we've been given all things of God, who has reconciled us to himself through Jesus Christ, and has given us the ministry of reconciliation, that is, that God was in Christ, reconciling the world to himself, not imputing their trespasses to them, and has committed to us the word of reconciliation. Now then, verse 20 is the key verse, we are ambassadors for Christ, as though God were pleading through us. We implore you on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God. Here we see in these verses that we represent Christ to the world. We're ambassadors for Christ. We have a message of peace. That is the message of reconciliation, reconciling those who are enemies back to God. And then we urge others and we plead, be reconciled to God. And we do that by our lives and by the words when we share the gospel. And so when we think of the role of an ambassador, they were sent by a king, and Christians are sent by Christ. They represent their homeland, and Philippians 3 says we are citizens of heaven. He delivers the message of the king, and here we're told to proclaim the gospel or the word of reconciliation. Ambassador seeks peace, and here we're told to share the message of reconciliation, maintains loyalty, and of course we live also as ambassadors as well as speak. And of course we speak with boldness, and of course in Ephesians it speaks about speaking with that boldness as we share the message. So living as ambassadors for Jesus Christ today, you must not misrepresent Christ with hypocrisy or compromise. We need to pray for three things. Pray for boldness, Like Paul, we must speak truth even in opposition and persecution. For mission-mindedness, we live in a foreign land, that is this earth, with a commission to proclaim Christ. And thirdly, for love and reconciliation. Our message is not condemnation, but restoration and the gospel of peace, as it says in Ephesians 6 and verse 15. So let's be good ambassadors for Jesus Christ. Thank you for listening.